Leafs converts, hockey world, what is up? This is the Leafs Convo podcast. My name is Norman James. It is great to be with you. It's a busy week ahead for those Maple brothers, and our podcast will reflect that with plenty of Leafs content, commentary, and conversation from us to you. Mike Augello is standing by. He and I will go over who we think will make the Leafs' final roster. It looks like there are positions up for grabs. It looks like that, but our guy's already anointed. Mike and I will discuss, plus there's more. He's ready to go. I'm ready to go. I know you're ready to go too. What do you say? Let's pod. The Leafs Convo starts right now. And here he is, the man who just got a chance to live out his dream and see his beloved Sabres play those nasty Maple Leafs in Buffalo. The one and only Michael in Buffalo / Cheektowaga. How are you?
Good morning, Norman. Well, it was an interesting experience seeing the Leafs actually win a game, even though it didn't count in Buffalo. That's a unique experience. It hasn't happened much. But in the Matthews era, I think it's gonna be a little more of a regular occurrence. Who knows?
Yeah, Buffalo used to be the house of horrors for Toronto, and I don't think it's going to be that terrible for them in terms of an experience in Below. However, the Sabres do have a nice little team, and I think they're going to be, if not a thorn in the Leafs side going forward, they're going to offer them a lot of competitiveness.
I think that the Sabres, after a sort of a false start on their rebuild and falling behind a couple lengths, to use a horse racing term, they're catching up in terms of adding talent. I mean, Middlestat, although he didn't play that great on Friday, I think is going to be a really good player, and Rasmus Dahlin is a supreme talent, if he avoids injury, and I hope for Sabres fans that he does, to go along with Eichel and a few other players. I think, they're in a position to be a much better team. It's going to take a little while. They got to straighten out their goaltending. I think their defense, other than Dahlin and Ristolainen, is a little slipshod, but they're going in the right direction.
So we have positions up for grabs, backup goaltender on defense, as well as the fourth line. Were there any revelations Saturday in Buffalo for you?
Well, to encompass the entire weekend, and I said this to a friend when they asked about the training camp battles yesterday, and I said the worst goaltender of the six that everybody saw on Friday or Saturday was Garrett Sparks, the worst of the six. And that's not, I'm not targeting Garrett Sparks, but it's a reality. I think Linus Ullmark played pretty good for Buffalo, and so did Carter Hutton on Saturday. Anderson has been steady there. They've used him 2 periods instead of going half and half the first 2 starts, and he played well on Saturday. Kelvin Pickard made, I think, 14 saves in the third period and played really well. And in the head-to-head matchup on Friday, McElhinney was great, and Sparks let in 3 goals on 12 shots, and I think 2 of them were bad goals. So, I right now, I don't know where they started off in terms of, okay, who are we going to keep and who are we going to risk putting on waivers? But I think if it was a even contest starting, that McElhinney is in a considerable lead over Sparks at the halfway point. But in a horse race or any other race, it goes down to the final eighth. And we're going to see them play a lot more in the last 4 preseason games.
So McElhinney was the incumbent in terms of a backup. Sparks had to shine to unseat him. He certainly hasn't done that thus far in the preseason, and let's just say that his opportunity to show what he has and take that spot was limited.
Yeah, I think that's fair, and I think that he had to now, and I can't put myself in the mind of Mike Babcock, but when it comes to your goaltending, the history that he has with Toronto, at least, is he wants his backup to be somebody he can trust. And I think somebody that works well with Frederik Andersen in terms of a support, because in the end, the number one is Frederik Andersen. He's the one that matters the most. And McElhinney is a veteran guy who realizes his role is to be a support player and a helper for Curtis McElhinney. And I think Garrett Sparks is a young goaltender who wants to be a number one in the NHL. And I don't think that matches up with being a support guy. Now, I don't know. I mean, I'm not in the locker room. I can't judge whether he will be or won't be, but I just know that it has worked with McElhinney over the last year and a quarter, and he's playing better than Sparks right now. The question is whether the Leafs want to risk putting Garrett Sparks on waivers to try to send him down to the Marlies, because I was told by a scout on Saturday that if they try to do that he'll get claimed. And I think that's the case. So some people think it won't happen, especially if he's playing badly. I think there are enough teams out there that need a backup goaltender that he would get claimed.
For a team that aspires to win a championship, don't you want your number 2 goaltender to be battle tested, a little bit older, a little bit wiser? I love what Curtis McElhinney told Terry Koshin of the Sun. I'm too old to worry about stuff, I just got to go and do it, and the chips will fall where they may. I think he's just mentally suited to be the backup.
Yeah, but I think what the organization is looking at here is asset management also. They're looking at, okay, is Sparks going to be a good NHL goaltender, and do we really want to lose him for nothing? That's why, I thought bringing 4 goaltenders to camp was, I thought that there was going to be some sort of trade during the offseason, either McElhinney or Sparks, to sort of clear the way. But they decided they wanted to have all 4 of them there, and now I think they're relying on, teams not wanting to pick up a goaltender at the end of the year, maybe going with the guy that they have. But there are teams out there that have injuries in goal and have questionable backups that I think they look at what Pickard is and they look at what Sparks is and they say, okay, that's an upgrade. So they're either going to trade if they decide it's McElhinney, or trade Sparks, or trade McElhinney. I can't see them trading McElhinney.
Realistically, Mike, how much work is the backup goaltender in Toronto going to get?
Well, I mean, Babcock said, the last 2 years he's used Anderson 66 games. And he was asked a question training camp about at the opening of training camp in Niagara Falls about that. And he says, well, ideally we'd like to use Anderson a little less, but, if we're coming down the stretch and we need points and this and that, we're going to play Frederik Andersen. So I think Anderson's going to end up playing 60 games and maybe the backup will play 22, but it could be more because they don't know where they're going to be.
There was criticism of Andersen directed at his fitness and his just mental wherewithal by the time they got deep into that Boston series. Are we expecting today's goaltender to grind out 65 games in the regular season and go the distance in the playoffs? Or, do we want to split it up a little bit so you have a goaltender who's physically fresh, mentally fresh for potentially a long grind in the postseason? Like, I mean, is it different now than it used to be when you had a Marty Brodeur or a Patrick Roy or a Dominic Hasek just grabbing the puck and running with it?
I think it has to be. I think, I thought Anderson was tired at the end of last year. I mean, his goals against dropped. His goals against rose. His save percentage dropped under 900. And there were games against Boston where I didn't think he was at the top of his game. And I thought you could put that on the defense as well. And I believe that would be the case. But, really, I think it's beneficial to, limit his starts to, say, 60 and maybe even a few less if you have an adequate backup goaltender. And, McElhinney can play 22 games. He played 16 last year or 18 or something like that. So it's a few more games and it's a little more rest. Now, they only have 13 back-to-backs this year, so that's one benefit to their schedule. But that I still think you're not going to play Frederik Andersen 69 games. You just can't do it.
Look, Curtis McElhinney was born to be a backup, and I like what he brings as the reliever. Garrett Sparks has lots of talent, but when we get into a crucial stretch, Freddie Andersen's kind of hit a wall. You need somebody to come in and off spell for, not several games, but 2 games here, another 2 games there. Is Garrett Sparks ready mentally to fill that role? That remains to be seen. I don't know if he'll get a chance to prove his worth in that situation. This is the Leafs Convo. Norman James and Mike Jello. This team is star-studded. we know what the top line is going to be, the second line, third line. What about the fourth line, Mike? Are we seeing a battle here potentially? Josh Leivo and Tyler Ennis. How does Josh Juris fit into the picture? We were talking about this on Facebook Messenger, ladies and gentlemen. Not too bad to communicate with. And, you seem to think Mike Babcock, no matter what's happening right now, is leaning a certain way.
Well, I think Josh Juris has been almost a complete non-factor. So I don't see him in the mix for the 13 forwards that they're likely to carry. I mean, first of all, a factor here is going to be, do they go 14-7 or 13-8? They're not going to keep 3 goaltenders from everything I've heard. So, are they going to keep 13 forwards and go with 1 extra forward or and 8 defensemen? It all depends on, what ability they have to bring up players from the Marlies. And they do have enough players who are waiver exempt, both at forward and defense, that they can really go where they want to go. And usually they go with 8 defensemen. So if you're talking about 1 extra forward, I don't think Josh Juris is making it now, and that's even with William Nylander staying out and being in an impasse on his contract going into the regular season. I've been impressed with Tyler Ennis. Tyler Ennis is a veteran guy, and he's taken advantage of his opportunity playing with Matthews. He not only did he play well on Saturday in Buffalo, he got a little frisky with a former teammate, Rasmus Ristolainen, who doesn't seem to like to play Toronto too much. And he made a nice pass on Matthews' goal. So I think Ennis has made the team, even though, it's not obviously not going to be on Matthews' wing unless they do that just until Nylander signs. But I think he'll be pretty good on the fourth line. But right now it looks like, I would say that Leivo is back in the same position that he's been in the last few years, which is he's going to be the 13th forward. I don't see him beating out anybody on the left side. It's like I project the lines and I look at it, and when Nylander is back, Leivo is the 13th forward. It just sucks because I for his sake, I would think that maybe Kyle Dubas would consider trading him, but you're not going to get a ton of value for him, and they like him as a player, but I just don't know whether he's not a fourth line type of guy. He's got skills, but I don't think he's good enough to beat some of the guys in the top 9. So it's sort of that catch-22.
How long does it take to develop a member of the fourth line, Mike? Josh Leivo is a nifty player. He's fun. I mean, he's going to have his backers, those who think he needs a chance, but this isn't the team to get a chance with. This is a team that is edging closer to contending for a Stanley Cup legitimately. Who knows? This team could have 115 points this season. I mean, they're going to abuse opponents often. Yeah. And Josh Leivo is great, but he needs to be in a position where he can get some decent ice time. And it's a crowded field, Mike. And for his own career development, had he been good enough to be in the NHL at this point, he would be. Don't you think?
Well, technically he is in the NHL. He's just not good enough to get in the lineup. I mean, and that, they've given him an opportunity, and Babcock has been generally positive about his comments about Leivo. He's played with Kadri and Brown. He hasn't scored, but he hasn't been, it's not like he's been bad. He's been okay, but I just don't know if okay in training camp is going to be enough to carve out a spot for him. I just see him as sort of on the outside looking in when it comes to, the opening night lineup, but it may depend again on William Nylander. Maybe at the beginning of the year he slots in with Kadri and Brown and they spread things out a bit. I mean, right now they've been playing Andreas Janssen and Kapanen on the fourth line between Parr and Lindholm, and I know that Babcock has continued to be sort of pushing and prodding Kapanen and Janssen to give him more because he hasn't seen enough. That might just be Babcock's MO to motivate his players. But, I never thought Andreas Janssen there would be a chance of him being sent down because, he is waiver exempt. But, maybe they do that early in the year to wake him up if they think he's in a slumber.
Yeah, Andreas Janssen scored a goal in that Boston series, then went on to lead the AHL Calder Cup playoffs in scoring, winning the Calder Cup. And, I had him anointed as a member of the team, and it just looks like, he's lost the step. And I don't think that is an indication of how his career is going to go. But he did have to come out guns a-blazing in this training camp. And, excuse me, it appears he hasn't been able to. And the fact that there's so much competition on the back half of the forward core doesn't bode well for him. It bodes well for the Maple Leafs, Mike. This isn't a rebuild. This is a build. And we're in the last stages of at least the last few stages of building a champion here. And I think it's just up to the players who wants to grab that position and run with it. So we've got another 4 preseason games to find out who's going to solidify those spots and who's going to bow out. And it'll be intriguing to the defense. Who do you think rounds out that bottom 6?
Well, I mean, Travis Dermot has been put at sort of a disadvantage with the shoulder injury. Now, I know that he was wearing a non-contact jersey last week, but later in the week was back in a regular uniform. I don't believe he's playing tonight. I don't think he was on the roster tonight, but I'm fairly sure he'll play in the last 3 games against Montreal and then the home and home with Detroit. I think Connor Carrick I think it's come pretty close to him losing the number 6 job. I think he was the guy leading in the minds of many people at the start of training camp as to who the number 6 would be. Igor Ozaganov, I think, has played pretty well. Kali Rosen has played well, although he's a left-hand shot. He can play the right side, although he's mostly played the left side in training camp. And Justin Hall has been steady and pretty good. And I have to say, the first-round picks, Rasmus Sandin and Liljegren have played well as well. So, they have all, come to the forefront with a good effort in training camp, which is a good problem to have. But Carrick really just has not. Carrick has been down in terms of, Martin Marincin territory being almost, and I'm not saying he's been a liability on the ice because that's Marincin's stock and trade. But Carrick is, it just hasn't jumped out. And I think that, he sort of needed to lock down the spot. He needed to open people's eyes and say, okay, I'm here. This is my job. I'm taking it. And it really hasn't happened. And that's disappointing because I like Connor Carrick as a kid. I think he's a good teammate. And he's a right-hand shot and he's got some speed. He's got some ability, but it's just, I don't know whether he's in Leivo territory, if he's anything more than an extra D. And they need, especially with Hainsey, who I'm concerned about sort of starting to slip, although it might be just the veteran taking the preseason off and then he's going to step it up. I'm concerned about the right side of this D, and I think they need, somebody who's more than just a hole filler on the bottom pairing on the right side. And I think Carrick is basically a hole filler right now, whereas Ozaganov might be a little better than that, and maybe Hall would be the same.
Where's Andy Wisniewski when you need him, Mike?
Oh God, or Jeff Finger.
Forgotten Leafs for a reason. This is the Leafs Convo, Norman James and Mike Augello. You're not going to replace Ron Hainsey right now. Again, at the stage this team is, it just wouldn't make sense. And Mike Babcock, he's not all about the hockey player of tomorrow doing their thing for the Leafs today, especially with this team having designs on winning a Stanley Cup. He's going to lean on his veterans to help him carry the day. So Tyler Ennis, he's been there, done that. Injuries and a little bit of a hiccup here and there. He's young enough to resuscitate his career, especially on a team where all he has to do is plug in a goal once every 2 weeks. And, in terms of Ron Hainsey, look, the guy's lost a step, and I don't want to see him carry too many minutes, considering his age and the fact that he's, way down on the trajectory of potentially retiring soon. So he's getting near that. But you're going to need him to help and augment the rest of the group. I just don't see Mike Babcock wanting to give Connor Carrick a blank canvas to try to figure things out once and for all, especially with this team knowing that it doesn't want to give up too many points at any juncture of the season.
I think what the Leafs organization has to plan for is the unforeseen situation. And with Hainsey, at the beginning last year, everybody thought he was going to be a bottom pairing guy. And then Mike Babcock said over the summer after signing, we're going to play him with Morgan Rielly. And up until the middle of the year, he played phenomenal with Rielly as a penalty killer. And then I don't know if it was too many minutes. He had a bad flu in the middle of the year. He came back and he was not the same defenseman. And, playing the minutes that he's playing, that's the concern. I think he can be a contributor one way or the other, but being on the top pairing, the weight's probably going to be more on Morgan Rielly if Hainsey has started to slip away. And, that's, again, I think that puts the pressure more on Kyle Dubas throughout the year to scan the NHL to find an opportunity to acquire a defenseman. And on Saturday, we saw Gardner and Zaitsev in old form, even though it's an exhibition game. I just have to point it out on the goal late in the second period where Jeff Skinner tied the game. Zaitsev drifts out of his position, hits the Leaf hits the Sabre defenseman or winger coming in. And that's all fine and good, and the forward covered him, but Gardner was out of position when the pass came, and Skinner was wide open in front of the net, and Gardner was in no position to prevent him from a scoring chance that beat Frederik Andersen. And these guys are going to play over 20 minutes a game, and they cannot make plays like that if this team is going to win consistently.
Mike, you talk about the Maple Leafs the same way you talk about the Yankees. Didi Gregorius only went 2 for 4, 2 doubles, but struck out twice. How dare he play baseball?
Yeah,
these guys they're human. They're going to make mistakes. I think where it gets frustrating is watching guys like Jake Gardner make the same mistakes he's made in critical situations year after year.
And somebody pointed out to me, he says, well, Jake Gardner plays 25 minutes a night because he scores 50 points, and it's sort of a double-edged sword. And I've always called Jake Gardner a double-edged sword. But yes, but the thing is that at certain points during the year, you need that player to play better defensively. So I don't know whether he's capable of stepping up his play in the defensive end. I've never really seen proof of it. We'll see this year if he is capable.
Who among the defensemen has room to improve their game, helping this team along the way? Is it Travis Dermott and maybe a little bit Morgan Rielly? I don't know if we can get much more from Jake Gardner. He is what he is.
I think Dermott has the greatest ceiling because he's only entering his second year. In terms of he could get into the top 4. I don't know whether it's unreasonable to think it's going to be this year. I think the key, other than Dermott and his maturation, is going to be Nikita Zaitsev. I think Zaitsev was good in his rookie year and had a lot of difficulties last year with injury and illness and a few other things. And I think they need him to get back to where he was as a rookie. And, remember, he was a rookie, but he was 25 years old. So we're talking about an experienced player who played years in the KHL. So I think he just had a bad year last year. I think he's going to bounce back. That'll help them considerably. But, they're using Nikita Zaitsev as a penalty killer. And I don't think that's what he and we envisioned him, because he was a power play guy in the KHL, and now he's blocking shots and playing in front of the net on the penalty kill. And I mean, if they had more of a defensive defenseman on the bottom pairing, like a Roman Polak, who they used a lot on the penalty kill last year, they could alleviate Zaitsev of that responsibility. But right now, it's going to be his, so we'll see.
Don't the Leafs have 4 of the same guy on defense right now, with 2 more coming up through the pipeline?
And that's the future of the NHL. Mobile. It doesn't matter whether you're 6'4" or 5'8" or 5'9". If you can skate, if you can pass, if you have good IQ, if you have vision, that's what they're looking for. They're not looking for lugging, hulking big defensemen to clear the front of the net. But at some points of the game, you need players who can clear the front of the net.
So what you're saying is the Leafs need to dredge up Ian White and bring him back. 5'8", 5'7", 5'6".
If it was Ian White circa 2007 or 2009 or something like that, yeah. I mean, that type of defenseman was the modern, is now the acceptable. His size was a problem back then. I don't think it'd be a problem right now.
I had him on the hook. Remember, you were a veteran
Yes.
of the hook, AM 980. Okay, let's wrap up. What's the situation? 4 preseason games to go. Montreal at Scotia Bank Palace tonight.
Yes, and the lineup that was put out by Leafs PR this late last night was essentially a Marlies lineup. You're going to have Kapanen, Lindholm, and Janssen in the lineup, and most of the players on the list are the players battling for bottom pairing and fourth line, and Sparks and McElhinney are net. So it's basically here, okay, guys, I'm going to put you all on the same ice at the same time, and let's see who stands out. Marner's not playing, Matthews is not playing, Tavares is not playing. So I think what they're doing is, and Babcock said this after the game in Buffalo, I'm going to split up the group into mostly an NHL group and mostly an AHL group, so he can start working on power plays and things of that in drills and practice at MasterCard Center, and here still give opportunity to players who are fighting for jobs. But really, he wants to get the familiarity going with the players who are going to be on the roster and then determine who's going to battle. I think there's going to be a significant cut of players probably Tuesday morning. And then they'll probably be down to 30, 31, something like that, and then make their final cut after Saturday's final game.
Is Mike Babcock giving Andreas Janssen another chance to get it in gear?
Yeah, I mean, let's just say he wants him to make the team. I think he's going to make the team, but I just think he wants to see more effort, and that's the key. Give us effort. If you give us effort and we know realize your talent, then you're going to make the team. But they need to see the Janssen that played at the end of the year and in the playoffs. Right now, they haven't seen much of that.
All right, Michael, great stuff. Safe travels. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Norm. That's a wrap for this edition of the Leafs Convo. Thank you so much for listening. How do you listen, by the way? On traditional podcast platforms like Podbean, Podcast Addict, Breaker, or the Mothership, YouTube? Let me know. At Norman James, TLC on Twitter, or just holler at me in the YouTube comment section. You can get at Mike in Buffalo, or the podcast in general at the Leafs Convo. Thanks so much for listening. We'll talk to you next time. The Leafs Convo is out.